Hey guys, it's Mrs. Thurston, and I wanted to do a quick video to explain where you should be in your poetry study. At this point, since we're not going to be able to have class today, as I'm working in my classroom, getting everything kind of shut down. I went ahead and explained a few things to block one and a few of you had some questions, but I wanted to go ahead and walk everyone through where they should be with their poetry study, even if some of the information was a little bit redundant, because it never hurts to have that refresher. So while you have the video playing, go ahead and pull up your poetry study, and I want to walk you through where you should be and where you're going over the next few days. Remember that everything in the 13 slides is due on Monday, so don't turn anything in until all 13 slides are complete. And hopefully you have a few of the slides already done by the time that you are watching this video, because if you have done something a little bit each day, you won't feel so overwhelmed as you're completing these next few slides. This is what you should already have complete. As we discussed in class today, you should have nice big green check boxes here for reading the nonfiction passage. You should have already answered the questions about the nonfiction passage, and you should have your letter written already to Emily Dickinson. Please remember, as was discussed in class, that you are still writing a letter to an adult. So while this is an informal letter, you don't necessarily have to have complete tuxedo language with super formal language. Think of it more like church or Sunday school language. You don't want to have text speak. Using the letter U for you, or falling back on your LOLs or bruh or anything else like that. But you do want to have a very friendly and personable tone, telling about your life, your family, your hobbies, your school, kind of maybe what you're going through right now with the quarantine and COVID-19, those kinds of things. But you don't want to be too familiar as far as maybe some things like you would use with text speak or on on your social messaging apps, Snapchat, text messaging, things like that. So please do be careful of that, because you are writing a letter to an adult. And Emily Dickinson lived during a time where, yes, they were very friendly and very familiar in their letters, and that was her main form of communication, but she still used very formal language. All right. This is the um, poem that you hopefully will now read for your next part. Uh, it is one of her shorter poems, but because Emily was such a recluse in her life and she did not like to socialize, most of her poetry was centered around nature and feelings, and how nature made her feel and the wonderment of nature. Um, and so, while I can't, nature's fine and all, but I can't necessarily relate to it. Um, it does hold a certain beauty in and of itself. So, for those of you who like the outdoors and like going on hikes and mountain ranges and those kinds of things, I think you're really going to appreciate what she saw in nature and the connecting with her surroundings, because she did have a unique appreciation for it. So when you're doing a deep reading of any piece of poetry, you're going to want to first read through it for and appreciate it for the work itself. So read through it once, just like you would any passage. Then do a second reading of it and note its unique features. So the first thing I would do, of course, is number my stanzas. And you will see that this particular piece of poetry does have 5 stanzas. And the next thing I do notice about this piece of poetry is that each stanza is broken up into 5 lines. It does have an every other line rhyme scheme that does seem to break in the third stanza. The third stanza does break the every other line rhyme scheme. My third block did point that out very nicely. Good job, guys. So take note of some of those other features of the poem, just so some of those things that should stand out to you when you're doing a deep reading of the poem. What I do like about this particular graphic organizer is that they're having you analyze the poem in 4 steps. The first step is looking at the vocabulary for the vocabulary's sake itself. Remember, Emily Dickinson lived in a time where English was shifting. So some of the vocabulary that she used is no longer as common today. So this particular graphic organizer identified some of that higher level vocabulary already for you that might give you trouble. I'm going to go ahead and point out and not define, but pronounce some of those words for you just in case they gave you trouble during your first reading. Scarcely, solitary, formula, sacrament, abroad, overtake, and encroached. Now, I know some of you, in order to follow the directions, are going to immediately go to Google, type this in, slap down a definition. What have we said about that in class? Google immediately gives you the most common definition. That's not necessarily the definition as the word is used in the passage or the poem. Please go back and make sure, does that definition make sense of as it is used in the poem? Double check. Go back, see if you can substitute that in the poem before putting it down in the box. And don't forget that when you do, type your answer in the gray text box where it says add text here. After you write all of your definitions, you do have additional questions to answer. What is the poem about? Don't think too hard, guys. This is not a trick question. Think about the title. Think about that first stanza. Don't read too much into it. When? It doesn't say where. When does the poem take place? Again, look at that first stanza. What happens in the poem? Okay, think about what happens to the light specifically over the course of the poem. Okay. What happens to the light over the course of the poem? Second part of analyzing this poem and looking deeper into the poem is looking at the figurative language as it is used in the poem. This poem in particular is chock full of personification. And personification is the giving of human characteristics to things that are not human. And Emily Dickinson is a master of this because Again, she wasn't a real people person, so she put human traits onto those things around her in order to make sense of her world. They did one example for you, so you only have to find two other examples of personification. So the example that they give you was a color stands abroad on solitary fields. So stands is that human characteristic that they gave to, of course, the inanimate object of color. So the color was spreading across the empty field. So you must do the same thing. You must say, hey, what is the object? And then what is its meaning? So why did she give that object a human characteristic? What was that point? Again, we're seventh graders. It's not enough to just simply identify the human characteristic. We have to, I'm going to come to you and go, okay, what's the point? Why does that matter? What was the purpose of that? We are big kids now. It's time to put on our big kid underwear. The third step in investigating any poem is to go, what does the author feel? What is the author's attitude? And that comes across in the author's, oops, my bad. That comes across, I meant to highlight. That comes across in the author's tone. Hate it when I mix up my tools like that. That comes across in the author's tone. The author's tone is the author's attitude or its feelings towards the subject. And Emily Dickinson, just spoiler alert, she had basically two attitudes or feelings: love and woe or sorrow. That's an oversimplification. Don't quote me on that. My mother was an English major, so she would be aghast if she heard me say that against her precious Emily Dickinson. Anyway, but Emily Dickinson, I'm terrible. I should be spanked. Anyway, Emily Dickinson put a lot of feeling into her poems. I should just go ahead and say that. And so what was her tone or attitude towards the light in spring, I should say. But I'm not going to say, hey, read this entire 5 stanza poem and tell me her attitude. That's mean, okay? So let's break it down into the format that she gave it to us. By stanza. Let's do it in small chunks. And this graphic organizer says, hey, do it by chunks. And hey, I'm even going to make it easier on you. I'm going to do the first stanza for you. So for each and every single stanza, you're going to answer 3 questions. This stanza says, the speaker feels, which means that the tone is, and give it a name. Again, this is not rocket science. As long as you don't overthink it, it's right there, guys. It really is. So go back and read that first stanza. The stanza says that there is a special light in spring. She comes right out and says that. So that means that the speaker feels. Remember, the author of the poem is not necessarily the speaker of the poem. The author can take on the tone of another speaker. So when we're reading a poem, we say, what attitude is the author of the poem taking on? We call that attitude the speaker. Okay? So the speaker, the one who is saying the poem, the speaker feels that the nature is beautiful. Therefore, the author's tone is inspired. Okay. Ta-da! Again, it's not rocket science. And you're going to get a lot of flexibility because as long as you can back it up, it's probably going to be okay. It's right there in the poem. So you've just got to tell me, what does that stanza say? How does that speaker feel? Then put a name to that feeling. Not rocket science. You can do this. So once you do all five of those stanzas, you then need to turn that into, what is this poem about? Boom. This poem is about the light in spring that does what? What does it do? How did it make the author feel? There you go. Once you answer those questions, put it in number 1. Simple as that. 2 to 3 sentences later, you've got the answer to number 1. You've completed your analysis. Then answer number 2. Look at what number 2 says. Dickinson tries to describe the special light of spring. Write down a line or a phrase from the poem that helps the reader visualize the light. Whoa. Did she just say visualize the light? Isn't there a figurative language term that deals with the senses? Oh yeah. It's that term called imagery. Identify the imagery in the poem that deals with visuals. Put it in. My pen just died. You suck. Put it in the text box. You're done. What do you imagine when you read Dickinson's words? In other words, what picture did she just paint in your head? Then you're done. So that means you have what? 2 to 3 sentences? So 2 to 3 sentences there. 2 to 3 sentences there. And what is the theme of this poem? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That big word theme. Life lesson or statement on human nature. Theme. What life lesson or statement on human nature is the author trying to make? Theme is a complete sentence. Remember that. Remember, you also need to have the proof. So I have to have proof plus a complete sentence for my theme. There's 2 to 3 sentences. This should not be hard, ladies and gentlemen. 6 to 9 sentences. That's not hard at all. I'm literally just filling in the boxes as I go along. Oh, speaking of filling in boxes, let's write some poetry. I know what you're going to say. Miss Thurston, I have to write poetry. How do I fill in boxes in order to write poetry? Well, it's pretty simple. Read the directions with me. Personification is giving human qualities to inanimate objects, ideas, or even animals. Describe things with human quality. Describing things with human qualities often makes a piece of writing more vivid. Emily Dickinson was a master at this. It can also portray tone very differently. Use the pre-writing below to develop original examples of personification. Then build a poem around your favorite example. So, all I need to do is fill in the boxes, pick a few good things that I came up with, and then I have a poem. It's really pretty easy. I'm going to do one, and then you can do one. And believe me, I'm the most unimaginative person on the planet. So I'm going to pick 3 animals. Write 3 types of nouns in each category. All right, so 3 types of animals. I'll pick my cat, an owl, and a gecko. Don't judge. Ideas. Now, when they say ideas, I want ideas or concepts that I can't see, touch, or feel, but I know exist. Their example is comfort. So ideas are things like love, humanity, and peace. I promise you that is peace. Objects. They picked wind. I'm going to say tree. And then I'm going to say desk. Only because I'm sitting at one right now. And something I could write easily about. An object I could write about. My car. I could probably write a poem about a car, right? I don't know. Ways people move. Well, now they tell me. Well, let's read the directions first. Write 3 verbs in each category. Well, I know verbs are actions. So ways people move. I know they shake sometimes. And ways people move. Shake, slide, and stumble. All S words are just completely coincidence. Things people do. Whisper, I guess cook, read, and paint. I don't know. Ways people feel. Ashamed, guilty, loving. Now match 3 nouns with 3 verbs from your responses above and complete the chart below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to match up what I wrote from the blue box down with the yellow box. Choose a noun from above, choose a verb, and why does the noun do the action and where does the action take place? So I'm going to take the owl. I don't know why I'm choosing the owl. The owl just sounds like a fun animal. The owl stumbles why does he do the action? The owl stumbles to catch a bus on a road in the country. And I decided it happened in the country. So guys, again, it can be that random. Okay? And do you see how it was even a little bit of a struggle for me? Again, I'm not very creative. Some of you are very creative. All you have to do is fill in the boxes. I was able to do it with the weird words I came up with, and I wish I could write a little bit better with this really jacked up pen. But just fill in the boxes. Once you fill in the boxes, you're going to pick one that you liked, or at least that you can write about. Then you're going to write a 7 to 10 line free verse poem and then expand upon it. So as you can see that they took their poem and wrote their poem in the box here. You don't have to rewrite the poem on a separate sheet of paper. Just give me the rough draft in the box here. Once you have written your poem, turn the whole thing in to Google Classroom. But remember, the whole thing is not due until Monday. It says Friday in Google Classroom right now, but I'm going to try to fix that before Friday. Okay? Guys, I believe in you. You've got this. Just remember, I'm still going to be available later Thursday afternoon for questions should you need something. I hope to be done in my classroom Thursday morning. So, email me, shoot me a remind, text me. I will do my best to get back up with you. This presentation is not due until Monday morning, and then we'll rock and roll and continue with poetry come next week. Have a great day, and I will see you all on Monday. Bye, guys.